So once you get your iPad, make sure you turn it on and you can start using the websites. There are also resources in your folder in addition.
I'm Candace. I'm a fourth grade teacher at the Environmental Sciences Magnet School at Mary Hooker. I've been teaching here for 1 year, but I've been a Hartford public school teacher for 6. I have a classroom of 19 learners, 6 of which have individualized education plans, and 3 of which are identified gifted and talented.
It's home. Yeah, open.
The process of planning for students with academic differences is challenging in the fact that I really do have to think of not only my struggling learners but also my high flyers. I think that when I think about rigor and incorporating rigor in my lessons, I think of high expectations, and not just having high expectations, it's continuously communicating high expectations with your students and for all students, no matter what their academic ability is. The second thing I think of is having higher order thinking and applied lessons and instruction throughout all of the topics and across interdisciplinary. And the last thing I think of is student-centered learning. And that means that keeping them first and making sure that their questions and that their work drives all instruction.
But biomass uses the same materials and it's turned into energy. And Kwame and Sincere are going to do some work in finding out how do you turn all of this garbage into energy.
I think that you break down a topic that is this high level by making sure that you only do very small amounts at a time. That's why we only do 2 questions a day. And we incorporated 1 reading on carbon footprint, and we really had to break that down. And do you understand? And if you don't understand that part, you can't move forward. That's why it's important, like to me, that while we might have an idea, like we as teachers, you might have an idea, this broad idea and this grand scheme of things that I want my kids to, solve global warming, and maybe it will happen. I've got some really great kids. But if they can't get through day 1, you cannot go to day 2. And that's what the most important part of all of this is getting to the day by day.
Some of it is just stuff laying around. Dead trees, dead tree branches, yard clippings.
Wait, that's energy?
Mm-hmm.
How do you think they take things like dead trees, yard clippings, and turn it into energy?
I ask a lot of the why and how questions because if I asked the students just what a renewable resource was and if their resource was renewable or not renewable, I would get a sense of whether or not they understood the concept at the surface level. But I wouldn't understand if they had a deeper connection to it, or if they would be able to apply that understanding to the next part, or if they would be able to move further.
Who cares about renewable or non-renewable? Kevin, who cares about that?
If it's non-renewable, you can't use it again. And if there's a limited amount, you'll have none left if you keep on using it and using it.
That's really what drives the instruction, is moving forward, not do they get this one static concept. If you could define something, that's meaningless. But if you could take that and make a connection to a global topic, then that's much more meaningful than just being able to say, Mom, I understand what non-renewable means. But if they're like, and that matters because in a couple of years, or a couple hundred years, we're not going to be able to use that resource anymore, and that matters today.
It's important, though, if you find the answer to your question, this is very important, that you write down the answer, but you also write down where you found it.
One of the Common Core standards is to look at different texts and different resources across different topics and compare them. And I want to take that just a little bit further, and I really want them to be able to evaluate texts and resources for bias, because it's one thing to take a look at 2 different texts on global warming and to recognize the similarities and differences and see, maybe one is a little higher level, or one includes this information, one's different. It's a total different thing to see of whether or not it's reliable and why it's not reliable. At the beginning of a lot of units, I do something similar to a marker barker. Sometimes I start with more, I guess, traditional anticipation guides. The marker barker, I just have them all do it in their notebooks, write down any words that come to mind about energy, and that's what I did. And I'm often surprised with how many words that they come up with that I did not anticipate. Sometimes words I don't even know that have to do with the word. And sometimes we make connections that we didn't initially anticipate, but they are relevant. Well, the folders themselves, they were just, the groups are basically given out based on how hard it would be to find information and how difficult it is to understand the concept of extracting energy from that resource. There are some that are just more difficult than others, and some just have more resources available. There's a lot on wind and solar power now because it's a new and upcoming thing, where there's less child-friendly material on nuclear power. So we found that petroleum is non-renewable, but how long did you find that it takes to make petroleum?
About to 200 to 300.
In order to assess the students periodically throughout the unit, there's a couple of ways that I check in. The simplest way is just through the basic conversations through the students, and I will, daily, I'll take anecdotal notes. Another way is I have a CFA quick checklist, and generally when there's time I will ask them to do one question, and I'll just quickly go around the room. Did they get it? Did they not? And that will give me enough information of whether or not I could go forward. And then the last way is with that web quest, there were 2 questions to go forward, and if they just don't have that, then I wouldn't. And in this case, I did feel that everyone was able to determine that whether or not their resource was renewable or not renewable.
They're talking about that in the score that it's 6,000 degrees Celsius that it can even melt rock.
And that about every 30 to 50 meters it gets hotter by about 1 Celsius.
I think that the students don't gain independence in one lesson. I think that this was something that's been scaffolded from the beginning of the year. Generally, they've been introduced to how to use an iPad in a lesson before that. They've been introduced to project-based learning in lessons before that as well. And a lot of it is just modeling work, sometimes in guided reading or in small groups, and modeling just on the smart board or just through work that I've done, and then a gradual release model and allowing them the practice. And sometimes you have to take it back a little and then let them go at it again.